President Trump thinks Canada will cave in. We will never, ever bow down to a bully. Canadians will always stick together. And we won't stand by as tariffs hurt our workers and their families. Canadians need to remain united. This situation, President Trump thinks Canada will cave in. We will never, ever bow down to a bully. Canadians will always stick together. And we won't stand by as tariffs hurt our workers and their families. Canadians need to remain united. This situation, unfortunately, could not be more serious. And at times like these, we need serious leadership and a serious plan.
Sir, I believe you are running for the Liberal leadership. Currently, our Prime Minister is a Liberal. If we need serious leadership and a plan, you're telling us that the current Prime Minister, your pal, your best buddy, doesn't have a plan and is not serious. It is actually an indictment of the current Prime Minister, who is technically still the leader of your party. So unless you're going to tell us that he is not doing a good job, your claim is a little bit confused, sir.
I'm ready to stand up for Canada. Who's with me? Well, President Trump and some Americans may be turning back the clock on climate action. We're picking up the pace. We're here today to address, in effect, three major issues that are wrapped into one big one. First, how to help hardworking families to finally get ahead.
You step down and get out of politics, Mr. Carney. That'll help. You stop advising the government. That'll help.
Secondly, how to boost the competitiveness of Canadian companies. And thirdly, how to build the strongest economy in the G7.
Oh, that's a rich one. The strongest economy in the G7. We're actually the smallest economy in the G7. So if you're going to be the strongest economy in the G7, you're going to have to leapfrog the Americans, the Germans, the French, the British, I think the Japanese, and a couple other countries in there. Sir, we are the smallest right now. It's going to take a while to build the strongest. Some of the suggestions you've got coming, I'm not so sure that's ever going to happen. But hey, we'll hear it. We'll hear you out.
All of these issues, each of these issues, is affected by how we as Canadians play our part in addressing climate change.
You've got a thing for climate change, sir. All your ideas are revolving around climate change. Sounds like that's your horse, which is okay. Everybody's allowed to have their horse. Poilievre has his axe the tax. You've got climate change action, climate change action, climate change action.
Now, before I go into our plan, I want to say a few words about myself.
Oh boy, here comes a life story.
Not a politician. I'm becoming a politician, but I'm not a politician. And so, slogan.
Yeah, no, you're not a politician. You were just the man behind the politician. And he didn't do such a hot job. So you finally are like, you know what? I'm just going to go be the guy in front because, he ain't doing a very good job as the face. You might as well come up forward and show your face.
Slander and sound bites don't come easily to me.
Slander and sound bites. I bet you've got a couple of sound bites in this speech alone. I'll point them out for you. Okay. First one, I'm not a politician. That's one of your favorites. That's a sound bite, sir. Unless you also don't know the definition of sound bites, but that's a sound bite.
And because I'm not a politician, I don't like press releases that are dressed up as policies. So if I see a politically expedient but half-baked solution, I'll reject it. What I am is a pragmatist. So if I see that something isn't working, I'm going to change it. So here's how our new plan works. My government will immediately remove the consumer carbon tax.
Sir, you're calling it consumer carbon tax right now, but that's because you implemented it. So come on now.
Let me be clear. If we were only to remove the carbon tax, we'd create two problems. First, Canada's emissions would not decrease as rapidly as before. And secondly, most Canadian households would be worse off because of the end of the rebate. Pierre,
Sir, the only reason you had to come up with the rebate is because you actually put a carbon tax So if you remove the carbon tax, you don't need the rebate. So those families that would be better off because you removed the rebate, that is assuming you somehow kept the carbon tax but didn't give them the rebate. See the logic there? That's I'm not a politician either. I'm a pragmatist.
Poilievre, with his simplistic and misleading axe the tax, doesn't care about either problem. Now, that's possible. It's certainly clear that he doesn't really understand how important that money in the rebate is to hardworking families across the country.
Once again, sir, the rebate is there because of the tax. If you remove the tax, it would make no sense to keep the rebate. That's where axing the tax seems to come from. So I really hope your suggestion is get rid of it. But hey, let's hear what you've got to say.
So how does it work? First, as I mentioned, to help Canadians invest in greener policies, we'll have the big polluters pay for climate incentives by developing and integrating a new consumer carbon credit market into the industrial pricing system. That way we ensure that taxpayers aren't on the hook for consumer climate incentives. Third thing we're going to...
Sir, if you work the carbon tax into the industrial carbon pricing system, you're not getting rid of the carbon tax. You're just putting it to another level. It eventually works out and affects the people. Because guess what? The companies that have to pay it will find a way to charge it in their products, which means at the end of the day, it actually is still there. You've just changed the name and moved it to another level. We, sir, are not stupid. You didn't get rid of the carbon tax. You simply moved it around.
To do is to ensure that there's fair competition for our companies and that we penalize high polluting foreign imports. So we're going to develop a carbon border adjustment mechanism.
Carbon border adjustment system. You just kind of called the Americans stupid for wanting tariffs. You are now going to put a tariff on the border for incoming products based on carbon pricing. Because guess what, sir? A border adjustment system is a tariff in everything but name. You're just not going to call it a tariff. You just want to call it something completely different. So first, you're going to move the carbon tax to a different level so that it's hidden. And then people think, oh, I'm not paying the carbon tax because I don't pay it directly. We already don't pay it directly because there's nothing on my receipt that tells me that I paid the carbon tax, but it's worked into the price of the goods that I buy. And now you're going to put a tariff, or as you like to call it, a carbon adjustment system at the border, a tariff. Work that into my products. Guess what, sir? I'm now paying for tariffs. The same thing we're lambasting our friends to the south about. So either they're right for wanting tariffs or you're wrong. Now, if you don't believe me that a carbon border adjustment system is a tariff, look up this speech in French. At this part exactly, he calls it tarification. Well, in his horrible French, he calls it something weirdly, doesn't say it right, but it's a tariff.
What that does is promote jobs here at home. It prevents carbon leakage abroad. This is the key point, and I want to be absolutely clear. We will do all of this while remaining laser focused on lowering costs for Canadian households. So we will be making big economic changes to ensure those households are immediately better off, and I very much look forward to sharing those plans with you in the days to come.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you know he ain't got no plan. He ain't got shit. I will share it with you in the days to come. I'm going to go think about it and maybe figure out how I'm going to sell it to you. I'll come back and sell it to you. But for right now, I don't know how I'm going to sell it to you. That's basically what the translation for that last little bit is. Very important. Did you catch that?
Working together, we will build that strongest economy in the G7, regardless of what happens south of the border. and we will do so for all Canadians.
If you win the leadership, become Prime Minister, do you intend to continue to prorogue Parliament?
Well, Parliament's going to be back on the 24th of March. Whatever happens in the leadership, and certainly it's crucial for Canadians that Parliament is back and it's working and setting the priorities for Canadians. Look, there's lots of issues. There's lots of issues been held up. And then on top of that, we have this economic crisis that has been caused by President Trump, so it's time to act.
Would you call a snap election?
Look, we need a strong mandate from the Canadian people, but what we're going to do is what's right for Canadians. If we're in the middle of a crisis and there's specific things that need to get done at that point, we will do them.
Translation, I will not call an election unless it works in my favor somehow.
Your comments today that you canceled the consumer portion of the carbon tax. Does that happen on day one?
Oh, you are gonna love the beautiful explanation he gives on this one. He basically seems to think we're kindergartners, maybe even worse than kindergartners. But listen to this one. Listen to how beautiful he explains this one.
Yeah, will happen on day one. And look, what's happened with the consumer carbon tax, and as you know, here in Atlantic, Canada, is it's become very divisive. So we're going to do several things, and I think this is a crucial difference. You know, Pierre Poilievre is just axe the tax. That's it. He doesn't care about the fact that most households will be worse off. He doesn't care what it means for jobs and future growth in the economy. So what we're going to do, we'll axe the consumer carbon tax. We will get the large polluters to pay for incentives for people in Halifax, across Nova Scotia, Atlantic Canada, across the country, to make investments in cleaner appliances, in EVs if they want to insulate their home, and on and on. Those are choices that people make as well.
If that's the case, why cancel?
Well, this is a key point. If you're Pierre Poilievre, he just stops there, acts the tax, he doesn't care. Doesn't acknowledge that households, on average, take a household in this region, it's a household of four, it's probably $800-900 a year on net that they will be worse off. We know that. We get it. We care.
One of the things you mentioned is that you would offer incentives to buy things like energy-efficient refrigerators, to get insulation done in homes. A lot of those programs already exist for those incentives. How is that going to help Canada reach net zero?
So there's a couple of things. One, what we're going to do, we're going to look at all of those. We're going to make sure those incentives are big enough and broad enough and clear enough to Canadians. Then secondly, what we're going to do is make sure not that the government pays, not that we as taxpayers pay, but the large polluters pay.
Sir, once again, I believe I made this point prior, but let's try this again a different way. If the so-called large polluters, which I'm assuming you mean the large businesses, corporations, manufacturers, have to pay for carbon pricing, they will work that into their price, which then means we, the consumers, are still indirectly paying, which is basically what we've been doing. You've just called it something else and moved it to a different level. As Mr. Big Shot economist, governor of 2 banks, I would think you would know that. And since I'm assuming you know that, I'm left to assume and to believe you're just trying to pull a fast one on us.
And so what happens?
But does that not ultimately trickle down?
No, because what the big companies are producing, by and large, are not products that we are consuming. There's some element.
Oh my God, that's the dumbest thing he's ever said. What the big companies are producing, by and large, are not things that we're consuming. So why are they producing them? Carney, Ford is making a car. The car has steel.
Of that, but by and large, a steel company, how much steel you use in these?
Carney. Ford is making a car. The car has steel or whatever else in it. If you charge them some carbon price for using too much steel or whatever else, they will work that into the cost of a car. I might not be directly buying steel, but I buy things that have steel in them. I buy things that steel is used to make them. So I will have to pay for that somehow in the price. Thank you very much. Don't be condescending. We are not idiots.
days, Todd.
I
mean, and not as much we used to. So anyway, so that's core to it. And then what happens is that those companies, they end up having a choice. Are they going to reduce emissions in their, say, factory, in that case of the steel company, or are they going to pay via the government, are they going to pay Canadians to reduce those? It makes the system much more effective. It'll move it forward.
Hey, sir, that's literally what we've got right now. Again, you're simply moving it to a different level. I'm starting to sound like a broken record. That's only because you, sir, are just trying to lie and obfuscate. You're moving the carbon tax. Maybe I won't see it directly, which I still don't right now, but I still pay it. And then you're going to tell me that I don't pay the carbon tax. Yeah, I do. In the prices, which I still do.
We'll reduce emissions by more. We'll get more money in the pockets of hardworking Canadians.
So you said this morning that you're not a politician. You've got the support of the majority of the Trudeau government caucus. Do you fear it might come across as looking like a new label on an old product?
I'm a very different person than.
I hope so. I hope you're a very different person. But okay. Let's see where you're going with this.
Current Prime Minister. I was born in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. My parents were teachers. I grew up in Edmonton.
Oh, please. You're starting to sound like Kamala with her, I'm the child of a middle-class family. Sir, you might be from Edmonton, Fort Smith, born to teachers. You are far from there now, okay? You're worth, what, hundreds of millions, tens of millions, I'm assuming, at least? Of course, you're not at the same level. What you're trying to say, because Trudeau was the child of a former prime minister, he was more elitist. You are literally the person behind his government telling them what to do. All that's changed is you've decided to come to the front because he was doing a shit job selling the dream. And they're all just like little lemmings following their master. So yes, it is the same government. It's lipstick on a pig, as they like to say.
I'm a goalie. He's a snowboarder. You know, there's lots and lots of differences. I have lots of experience in the business world.
Trudeau, you do not take one lying down. He's basically saying you ain't got no experience. Ow.
Experience around the world. I'm bringing something very different. I'm only in this.
You've been closely aligned to this government, though.
Look, I've provided some advice to this government. Quite often, they haven't taken my advice, and there's a number of things the government has done.
Yes, Carney, you finally admitted that you were advising them. Good for you. The first step to admitting you have a problem is accepting that you have a problem. Then you can address it.
That I didn't agree with and that I will change. It's also about the moment, though. We are in an economic crisis caused by events south of the border, but on top of cost of.
We are in an economic crisis caused by events in the South, on top of the advice that you gave the federal government, which they took, by the way. They did not take your advice, they took it. Carbon tax, your idea. Capital gains tax, your idea. So don't you sit there smugly and say they didn't take my advice. Come on now.
Living crises, housing crises, we feel right here. We need to move against those, for better or worse.
Yes, relationships can change. In recent weeks, the U.S. has called into question our decades-long relationship of cooperation. While I welcome the temporary suspension of U.S. tariffs, recent events have been a wake-up call for Canadians. The world has changed, and we too must change to realize the full promise of our great country. Since I launched my campaign a few weeks ago, I've heard from people across the country that they too want change. Canadians want change with a plan that stands up for Canada and creates an opportunity for all Canadians. Canadians want change with a new, positive leadership that ends division and builds together.
Oh, you're taking a shiv one to Trudeau lately, hey? You're basically saying he had divisive leadership. Okay. And you, sir, are going to end it, are going to make it better. All right. I guess you're just going to start backing that bus onto him like Christia's been doing the last little bit, eh? You're going to drive that bus too, eh? Well, I hope he's comfortable, because sounds like it's going to get nasty.
Now, I'm not a politician,
I am a pragmatist.
There's your catch line. I'm not a politician. I am a pragmatist.
And so if I see something that's not working, I will change it. And that's why last week I proposed a new climate policy, eliminating the consumer carbon tax. We can and must change.
So you didn't get rid of the consumer carbon tax. You basically just put it to a different level of the system and then called it change. You put lipstick on a pig. It's still there in your plan. It's just called something different.
How much of your hard-earned money you get to keep. Canada needs a middle-class tax cut, and my government will give them one.
Oh, you're sounding like poilievre, my friend.
To their incomes, so they can catch up after being knocked sideways by the pandemic and the housing crisis. Here, too,
They were knocked sideways by your policies, sir. Your policies during the pandemic and the housing crisis literally knocked the middle class sideways. Now you're going to give them a tax cut. You're sounding like poilievre. X the tax. Okay. X the tax, Carney.
my government will deliver. And all Canadians deserve more competition in our economy so that they can get the best value for their hard-earned dollar. We can and must change how we build. This is a pivotal time for our economy, a time to build, and my government would catalyze enormous private investment to build millions of new homes for younger Canadians.
I really don't want to see what you're about to do with the Canadian home system or the housing system, because if the guys before you messed it up, you about to burn it down. You're going to burn it down. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that is Mr. Mark Carney, the next Prime Minister of Canada, because unless Chrystia has a rabbit in her hat and she pulls it out on the last day, he winning. So that's our next Prime Minister. Now, if you enjoyed the commentary, please consider leaving a like and subscribe. Share the video. Help us out. Otherwise, see you next time.